Welcome to Module 11. In this module, we're going to be talking about something called a repeated measures t-test. This is a special kind of t-test that I think is a lot simpler than the independent samples t-test that we did last week. So I hope that you find this lesson pretty easy to digest. And without further ado, let's take a look and see what we mean by a repeated measures t-test. So in this section, I'm going to speak with you about the logic of a repeated measures t-test, and we're going to talk about some factors to consider when using this type of t-test. And later on, we're going to talk about some assumptions that we make in order to accurately perform this type of hypothesis testing. So in a repeated measures t-test, you have a pre-test and a post-test. And this pre-test and post-test is given to the same group of people. And so it's a single group of individuals that are selected to be in the study, and each individual is measured in two conditions. And scores from both conditions are then compared. So instead of having two unrelated independent samples, you basically have one sample of individuals that are tested two different times on some measure. There are advantages to this. First of all, the same number of individuals are used in both conditions so that any bias that you might have in the sample is minimized. In other words, in an independent samples t-test, for example, you have two different samples and the people in those samples might vary widely on characteristics that could affect the study. You might have one group, for example, that are quite different in terms of maybe their motivation as a whole. And because they have this difference in motivation, it affects whatever it is that you're measuring. So when you are measuring the same individuals in both conditions, you're eliminating the idea that there may be something else systematically responsible for whatever change you might be seeing between the two groups. Some more advantages are that a repeated measure study is really good for studying change over time. Because if you give the same measure to a group of people at time A and then later at time B, well, they're still the same people. They really haven't changed. But something has changed within that measure over time. So you can attribute that change more accurately to the passage of time or the experience of some sort of intervention. So it's good for studying change. And finally, repeated measures design requires fewer subjects than an independent samples design. Because you are measuring the same group of people twice, you don't need as many people to have a significant finding. So a variation on repeated measures design is something called a matched subjects design. And in this case, you have two different samples, two independent samples. However, within each sample, a participant is matched with a person in the other sample who are similar in some variable that might be important to the study design. So when you do a matched subjects design, you are sort of getting rid of some of the variation that is inherent in independent samples because you're matching up the participants, but they are still independent samples as well. So basically, we have three different types of studies we could be looking at. And let's just do a little practice to see if you can identify what these studies might look like. So the data from a research study consists of 10 scores in each of two different treatment conditions. Okay, so think about this. There's two different treatments, and there are 10 scores. How many individual subjects would be needed to produce these data? In each of these types of research design, go ahead and pause the video now and try to think about how many subjects would be needed for each of these. All right, for an independent measures design, you would need 20 subjects. If you have 10 subjects in each treatment condition with two samples, that would mean 20 subjects. For a repeated measures design, you would only need 10 subjects because the same subjects are used in each treatment condition. And for a matched subjects design, you again would need 20 subjects, two samples with 10 matched pairs. The point of this is the beauty of a repeated measures design. you can do the same type of research, but with less people. And why is that important? Well, sometimes it's really hard for researchers to recruit people to be in studies. And so you could do a repeated measures design that not only helps you to eliminate sort of any systematic differences between these independent groups, but you can use less subjects as well. Okay, in the next video, we're going to go over the steps of doing a repeated measures t-test.